All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. We're talking some New York Giants football today. Joining me on the line is the Giant beat reporter for The Athletic, Dan Duggan. Dan, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Mike?
Doing pretty good. Doing the best we can to stay safe, socially distance, and all that stuff. So it's nice to get people distracted and talk a little New York Giant football.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this offseason. I mean, this all kind of started back in January when they hired Joe Judge as the new head coach. Like, what was your take on the hire, and do you like it to this point?
I mean, like everybody else, my first reaction was who? Certainly, he wasn't a household name, and when the list of candidates they were going to interview for the position came out, he certainly wasn't, penciled in as a favorite. But as obviously I got to know him as the rest of the world did, I think he was very impressive in that opening press conference, which I think a lot of times that can be overblown. But for a guy like him, who was really an unknown quantity, he had to go out and project a really strong image, and I think he did that. I mean, that will only carry you so far, but you only make a first impression once, and I think he made a strong one. It's so early. We're totally in the honeymoon period. Everyone kind of thinks their new coach is going to be Vince Lombardi at this stage. But I think he seems to have a plan, and I like sort of the fact that the Giants went outside the box here. I think one of the things that this franchise has sort of probably hurt itself with is kind of playing things safe and kind of sticking to what's comfortable. I mean, this is definitely a risk that they're taking. 38-year-old guy who's never been a head coach, but I think that sometimes no risk, no reward, and what they've been doing certainly hasn't been working. So. Now is as good time as ever to take a chance on a guy like Judge, who clearly, they see some serious promise in.
Yeah, I would say from the Giant fans I've talked to, Joe Judge has a very high approval rating. Same can't be said for Dave Gettleman. We've seen him for a couple of years now. So how do you think he's done as the Giant GM in his tenure?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a bottom line business, so the results have been very good. I mean, you have to account for the fact that he didn't inherit a great situation. Obviously, coming off a 3-13 season and a franchise that's been headed in the wrong direction. But I think his first off season was like really bad. And I think they're still digging out from that. Like he came in a tough spot and made it worse by sort of the patchwork approach he had to that first off season. Whether it's spending top dollar on Nate Solder, trading trading for the right to pay top dollar to Alex Ogletree. The Saquon pick is, probably a debate for another day. I think just the whole idea of let's try to maximize whatever time Eli Manning had left and become a contender, was really short-sighted and really, kind of foolish as we look back on it. I think since then, to his credit, he has sort of admitted his mistakes in both actions and in words. And, I think he is, pivoting to what this thing should have been, 2 years ago, which is, really a full rebuild. I mean, obviously they have the new quarterback in that they're going to try to build around. And I think the approach has changed drastically. And I think that is a good sign. Now, the big question is he signing the right players, drafting the right players? It's still early in that process, and it will be a process. So, we're not going to get those results overnight. I think, again, the rebuild should be further along, but I think he kind of, left things stuck in neutral there for the first 2 years, and it seems like now is really starting to accelerate that and is making better moves. But again, we'll see because again, results rule the day in his industry, and he's fully aware of that. So, another rough year, and he might not get to see this rebuilding process through.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of his biggest lightning rod moves, I think even he under True Serum will tell you was probably a mistake, was the trade for Leonard Williams to give up the 2 picks for him. Obviously, he puts the franchise tag on him. So how long do you think, how big a contract do you think Leonard Williams is going to sign with this team in the long run?
I mean, that's a fascinating question right now, because I think there was sort of a perception that, either when the trade happened or, in the offseason that there was sort of a handshake deal and this would be, kind of no hassle, they'd lock something up long term. And, here we are, free agency is, almost 2 weeks old, and, nothing is imminent as far as I understand. So there's a chance that they just don't come to an agreement and Leonard Williams plays this year, on the tag. And, hey, listen, there's worse things to do than to make $16 million guaranteed for one season of football and then, hit the market again at, age 26. So, I think Leonard Williams is in a good situation. Obviously, I think the Giants would like to come to a long-term agreement. I'm sure that's Williams' preference as well. But again, he's in a good spot here that he doesn't need to, take some lowball offer. Like I've seen that, there's been reports that the Giants want something multi-year in the 10 to 12 million average range. If I'm Leonard Williams, I don't see why you're taking that. I think again you get that 16 million in your pocket, and you have a chance to go maybe make even more next year when the cap's going to go up. So if I'm him, I'm probably not taking anything less than, let's say, 14 million a year. And even then, I think you're giving a little concession because, like I said, you got 16 million you can put in the bank right now. But so I would say something in the 3 years, 42 million, 3 years, 45 million would probably make sense. But again, as soon as Williams signs that tender, which he hasn't done yet, which I'm actually a little surprised that he's waiting, given the fact that Dave Gettleman has pulled the franchise tag once before with Josh Norman. I don't want to lock that up before I had something crazy happen like that. But I think once he signs that tender, he's sort of in the driver's seat. To listen, if they come with a great offer, hey, you sign it, and you know where you're going to be for the next 3-4 years. But otherwise, I don't think it's a really bad alternative for him to just play out this year. Hopefully have a better season than he just had, and even raise his value going into next offseason.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about Gettleman pulling the tag on Josh Norman back into the Panthers. I saw SNY's Ralph backing out put a theory out today about, is that a possibility down the road? What do you think it would take for Gettleman to even consider doing that here?
I think it's unlikely, because again, that was a very rare move. I mean, obviously Gettleman has done it, but it's just not something that's done around the league. And I don't think it's something you want to see STM make a habit of, because that would really, I think, really reflect poorly with agents and players and stuff like that. Who've done it twice in a 5-year span. So I think that's a total last resort. I know there's people out there saying, well, they could pull the tag and then use that money on Clowney. I don't mean, listen, I guess that makes sense sort of in a kind of fancy football world, but in terms of it just wouldn't be good faith. I mean, Clowney was out there. If you wanted him, you could have just spent the money you already set aside for Williams then. So to pull it now, you're really kind of screwing Williams, because teams have already made their big expenditures. So you're putting him out of the market, at a tough time. And listen, it's a business. The Giants certainly would be within their right to do that, but I don't think that'd be a good way of doing business. And Gettleman, it's a tougher thing to do. He came in, inherited Josh Norman. Maybe he wasn't a guy that he really, felt highly about. Obviously, Norman played well, but I think Gettleman was easier to walk away from a guy like Norman. I mean, he put, his butt on the line to make the trade for Williams, to then pull the tag. I mean, I think it would just be sort of just such a disastrous move from a PR front or, whatever. I have a tough time seeing him actually following through with that. Again, there's no reason to think that Williams is going to be a destructive force or hold out. I mean, listen, they put the tag on. Again, if I'm Williams, I sign it. The fact that he hasn't, he does run that risk, but I think it's pretty low odds that Gettleman would do that again to somebody.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Let's go to some of the moves he's made so far. They bring back James Bradbury, who he drafted in Carolina. He brings him in to be the Giants' #1 corner. Do you like that move?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely needed, to make a move at corner. Obviously, when they moved on from Janoris Jenkins at the end of last season, that was made the spot that much weaker. There's a lot of young players there that were, at best, I would say, kind of up and down, as rookies or at least the first-year player in Sam Beal's case. So they couldn't go into the season with, just running it with the guys they had last year, because there's, some major question marks there. So they needed to get someone established. I think Byron Jones obviously was the top guy in the market. Giants had some interest there, but it just seemed like, both sides, I knew that wasn't going to fit. So, they set their sights on Bradbury, who I think was, pretty unanimously considered the second best corner. So, they got the second best guy on the market. They're paying him less than Jones. So, they, value kind of matched, what his skill set is. And, I don't think he's going to come in here and be, Patrick Peterson in his prime or Darrell Revis in his prime, but I think he's, very good, solid corner. You like the fact that he's 26 years old. I mentioned Jenkins. He's a guy who was sort of up and down and, just kind of a quirky personality. I think Bradbury, from all accounts, very solid guy, durable, not going to make any waves. So I think that shores up a weakness. And, again, I think he's going to be a good, solid player. Might not be an all-pro, but still definitely an upgrade at a position that really needed one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I feel like Giant fans, I know also have been screaming for years this team needs linebackers. They've added a big one in Blake Martinez. How would you view that deal? I know some people were saying, maybe they overpaid a little bit when a better linebacker, Coylton, got just a little bit more to go to the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little less enthused about the Martinez signing. I think he's a solid player. I think he's better than Al Ogletree or whatever other options they would have had on the roster. Yeah, I mean Corey Littleton, Joe Schobert, guys who were also available who ended up making similar salaries. I mean Schobert's deal's 5 years, but end of the day they're all in that sort of like 10, 11, $12 million a year range. So they could have afforded those guys, but it really feels like they locked in on Martinez from the outset. I think a big part of that is Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, was the linebackers coach at Green Bay 2 years ago, so he knows Martinez very well. But have a high comfort level that this guy's going to be in the middle of my defense, getting everybody lined up, calling the shots, and I think Martinez, from everything I've heard, checks all the boxes as far as intangibles and leadership. So I totally understand why, I think Patrick Graham, you want that guy running your defense. I just don't know that he's going to be a huge difference maker. And for $10, $11 million a year, I think, you might have been able to spend that money on someone who's going to make a bigger impact. I mean, Martinez is going to lead this team in tackles for the next 3 years, barring injuries. That's a lock. I mean, the guy, he racks up tackles. I just don't know that he's a real difference-making player, and I think that the defense that did need the difference makers. So, solid in the middle, but, when you look at what they have at edge rusher, even free safety, I don't know if the resources on Martinez, could have been used elsewhere and maybe yielded a greater return.
Yeah, the Giants also made a bunch of secondary moves, but I feel like they still have some issues. Like, what do you think is the biggest thing that you're surprised they've not really addressed yet?
I mean, there's just touch on it. Definitely edge rusher. I mean, even Gettleman acknowledged after the season, I think he was on WFAN, and they asked him, what's the biggest sort of hole on this roster that you need to address? And he, flat out said, I think we need to improve our pass rush. And I just don't know how you can look at the moves they've made, so far and come to the conclusion that it's improved. I mean, I guess best case scenario, if Tyler Fackrell bounces back to the form he had in 2018 when Graham was with him in Green Bay, maybe he's, equitable to Marcus Golden, but they didn't go out and obviously, get Jadeveon Clowney, a lot of the top edge rushers, got franchise tags, so that sort of shrank that pool a little bit, but it wasn't a great pass rush last year, and, there's really no notable upgrades that they brought in to date, and even you look at the draft, unless Chase Young somehow slides to the fourth pick, there isn't some slam dunk, edge guy that they can get who they can plug in from day one and count on to be, a real disruptive force off the edge. I think that definitely sticks out as a weakness, and maybe the options were a little bit limited, but still surprised they weren't a bit more aggressive in trying to address that spot.
Yeah, so obviously that's a big issue, but like if you had to give the Giants, like as of recording, like a free agency grade, what would you give them?
It's so hard because listen, I don't ever pretend to be a scout. I mean, you talk to people and you get as much information as you can, but so often I think everyone thought the Nate Solder signing was pretty good a couple of years ago, and that certainly hasn't panned out. So I'll give it a B, but I'll give it a B in this sense. Like, I don't know if Blake Martinez is going to be a really good inside linebacker for the next 3 years. Like, I think a guy like Cameron Bradbury, their floors are pretty high and the ceilings are probably relatively low. So I think they are probably going to be solid players. But the reason I'll give them a B is I like their approach to this offseason. They really changed their way of doing business, whereas in the past they've given out lucrative signing bonuses, which allows them to maybe add a few more big money players, but it adds pain down the line if you want to get out of those contracts. So, I mean, you look at 2016 with Jenkins, Olivier Vernon, and Damon Harrison. They signed all those guys to 5-year deals with signing bonuses. None of them finished those deals, so when they got rid of them, whether it was trades or cuts, every single one of them left dead money on their cap. I mean, obviously the Odell trade, the JDP trade, all those types of moves, they gave big signing bonuses, and that has hurt them in their cap going forward because they bailed on those guys so early, and they really can't cut Nate Solder right now because it would just be kind of cost prohibitive in terms of the cap. So I like the way they structured this deal. So instead of giving big signing bonuses that prorate over the length of the contract, they went roster bonuses in year one. So, Blake Martinez, James Bradbury have very high cap hits this year, but, going forward, the final 2 years of their deal, they're lower, and there's no real commitment, so the Giants can get out of both of these deals after 2 years, which, again, you're not planning on doing, but it's good to just have that flexibility, and I think it's smart that, while they're rebuilding, they didn't need to go all in to try to fit, one more stud into this class, get some solid players in here, make some strides in 2020, and then go into the next offseason with a ton of cap space again, and then you can really, maybe hopefully accelerate the process, because I think this is really sort of, ground zero or, a little above that because you do have Jones in here. So that was a big piece to the rebuild. But I just like the approach. I mean, remains to be seen if the actual execution, will will turn into wins, which is obviously the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it definitely is the ultimate goal. And I think, like, one thing you brought up, I also wanted to ask your opinion on. It's like we are now basically a year out of that Odell Beckham trade. I know it was blasted at the time. You think a year out, do you think it makes more sense to the Giants that they did it?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks better, now than it did a year ago when I was, a big critic of the trade. I think Odell certainly didn't have the type of season in Cleveland, and the Browns themselves didn't have the type of season that a lot of people expected. So I guess we'll see if he has another year like that. It'll even look even better. I think when you look at the return, it was a pretty good return. So you look at what the Texans, that disastrous DeAndre Hopkins trade. I mean, that was made the Odell return look a lot better. You look at Stephon Diggs, and I think Minnesota got a pretty good return there. And I don't think he's as good a player as Odell. So, I mean, I think the return was solid. At the same time, like, let's see what those players turn into, too, because I'm not, convinced that your Bill Peppers or Dexter Lawrence or O'Shane Ximines are going to be real, game-changing type players. And, Odell at his best certainly was that. And you look at this offense, and they do lack that sort of big play weapon at receiver. Maybe Darius Slayton becomes that, but it was a little tough at times last year to see how much these receivers struggle to get separation. You think, man, imagine this offense if Daniel Jones is throwing to Odell. But no, I definitely think the trade, looks better at the 1 year mark than it did, right when it happened. And again, I think this is going to be probably a big year to determine, really how it's viewed, because I did not expect Odell to, have such a sort of eager output in year one in Cleveland. It seemed like that everything was sort of a disaster there with Freddie Kitchens and with Mayfield and everything. So maybe they, turn things around and the views change again. But I definitely think you have to feel better about it if you're the Giants. And I'm sure Dave Gettleman feels a little bit of vindication because obviously he was crushed at the time of the trade.
Yeah, he was. And I think he has one big asset left to play this year, which is the 4th pick in the draft. And where do you think they're going to go with that? I've heard them linked to Lyman, I've heard them linked to Isaiah Simmons. Like, what do you feel like they're going to try and do there?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the two obvious fits, and, the matchup with value would be either Isaiah Simmons, or an offensive tackle. I think a lot of people would like to see them trade back, and it does seem like Gettleman, who has never traded back in 7 drafts, is at least open to that possibility. Of course, it takes 2 to tango, so you need to find a trade partner, so it's hard to go too far down that hypothetical. But if they just stay at number 4, if they can't find some of the trades, I definitely think it comes down to tackle or Simmons. I feel like, all things being relatively equal, and I don't know what the draft board looks like. I think you have to go tackle. I think that's just been a weak spot on this roster for so long, and it's a chance. There's guys that are considered, top 10, worthy picks. So they're in that position where if you can find that guy to protect Daniel Jones' blind side, to open holes for Saquon Barkley, it really makes those picks that much better. I mean, I know Isaiah Simmons is a unique talent and would probably make a huge impact on this defense. At the same time, I do feel like that type of player, you might be able to find other ways. It's really hard to find these top tackles. And if you really love one of them and you're sitting there, I think, Ty kind of has to go to that position because it's just such a valuable position, such an important position. And top tackles just don't hit the market. I mean, you saw, Jack Conklin was really the only guy who cashed in this offseason. Giants didn't go after him. So by the fact that they kind of sat back and haven't really addressed tackle, to me, that sort of is a hint that that's why they're leaning with that first round pick. But of course, it's an unpredictable process. So who knows?
Yeah, my last question is this: you mentioned that Dave Gamble has never traded back, and obviously there's a faction of the fan that thinks it's a smart thing to do. Teams like Miami and the Chargers possibly looking for quarterbacks long term. Like, how big a deal is it that Gamble has never done it in terms of maybe he's gonna change his mind now, or he's just set in his ways that I can't pass on this guy because he kind of a gold jacket on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's sort of a flaw in his approach. I mean, and again, it's not just him; it's sort of organizational. I mean, Jerry Reed, he never traded back in 10, 11 drafts over many he ran. Ernie Accorsi, I think he traded back for Kiwanuka, and otherwise, I don't know if he ever did it. It's just something about the way that school of GM, they're big on the bird in hands worth 2 in the bush. They don't like the unknown of trading back and flipping picks. And listen, you look at some of the best teams and most well-run organizations in the league. Obviously, you look at the Patriots, and they trade in picks left and right. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to hit on the picks, but the kind of the point of trading is it's a complete crapshoot. So give yourself more cracks to the play. Let the number 4 pick versus number 8 pick. the odds of nailing that, aren't maybe that great. But let me just take the 8th pick and then pick up 2 more picks in the middle round. Like I said, just kind of increase your odds of finding players. Because to think that I know that this guy I'm going to take at number 4 is going to be a star, going to be a Gold Jacket player, I think that's overconfidence that I think definitely has bled into Gettleman's decision making. But hey, they totally adjusted the way they structure contracts this free agency. So maybe the old dog can learn new tricks and also embrace trading back. He's got a guy, Joe Judge, who spent formative years in New England, so he certainly has seen the value of that approach. So things are lined up for them to do it if Gettleman is ever going to break that trend.
All right, there we have it. Dan Duggan on the Giants. Dan, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how do people follow you on social media and keep up with what you're writing on The Athletic about the Giants?
So Twitter is just DDuggan21, and then The Athletic. Hopefully people are pretty well aware of that right now. And we're actually running a 90-day free trial during all this craziness where there's not a lot of sports going on. We're still producing a lot of content though, so people can just go to theathletic.com and check that out, and give us a look. And after 3 months, and hopefully sports are back, you can see if it's worth keeping. But I promise in those next 3 months, I'll be putting out a lot of Giants content, and all my colleagues will be covering their beats as best we can in this kind of crazy time.
Yeah, I'm a big Athletic reader. I love the stuff you guys are doing over there. Dan, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
All right, and there you have it. That was Dan Duggan of The Athletic talking Giants football. Up next, we'll go from the beat reporter's perspective to the fans' perspective. I'm going to be joined by a couple of Giant fans on the Giants edition of the Fan Forum right after this.